federal government has cut off any flights. The fact is that the city of New York is safe right now. It's secure. People should not panic, and they should just go about their lives, and they should have confidence in America and in American democracy. We're going to overcome this, and we're going to prevail. We're going to find out. I'm sure our government's going to find out who did it, and we're going to make an example of them.
You know, of course, there was the mayoral primary and other primaries here in the city of New York. Those have been, we understand, canceled.
Yes,
for
Governor Pataki and I decided about 2 hours ago that it did not make sense today to have an election going on. Among other things, we needed the police personnel that are used during the primary to focus on this rescue effort and assisting each other.
Where were you when this terrible episode began?
Well, when I first was notified, I was in Midtown Manhattan, and I rushed down and saw a good deal of it with my own eyes. Saw the damage that was done to the World Trade Center, saw people jumping from the top of the building. And then we were in 75 Barclay Street, where we set up a temporary command post, and then we were hit by the debris from the collapse of the Trade Center, and were trapped in the building for a short while, then had to evacuate.
75 Barclay Street, is that your command center?
That actually was a ground floor area right next to it. We were using a ground floor area as a temporary command center so that we could be close to where the rescue efforts were taking place. And as we were setting up, and we were on the phone talking to the governor and the White House, and the building collapsed, and we had to evacuate through the basement. It was pretty dicey for a while.
From your long years of experience at the Justice Department, you are not only familiar with trying to govern Manhattan, but also familiar with the operation of terrorist cells. What do you say to the people who inflicted this terrible attack on America? I have no doubt that we're going to find out who's responsible for this, and that we're going to make an example out of them. And I believe that ultimately the strength of American democracy will prevail. We have to have confidence in ourselves now, and we have to have a sense that our government, a government of democracy and laws, is the future of this world, not this kind of horrible, awful, inhumane way of acting. And I'm sure we'll find out who's responsible for it and make an example out of them. Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York City, joining us live by telephone. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We know you have much to do today. It'll be a sleepless night and mostly a sleepless week for you, I'm sure, but thank you for taking the time to be with us. Once again, the mayor's words there. If you have medical specialties, if you can in some way contribute to the rescue effort, you're asked to report to your hospital. To be able to do that, ordinary citizens can donate blood at any hospital in the New York area or any of the blood centers that are already established. But please stay away from Lower Manhattan if at all possible. We're joined now by Marine Colonel Oliver North, former Marine Colonel Ollie North, who can give us some of his perspective. Ollie, a lot of people, Newt Gingrich among them, are saying that this is the 21st century Pearl Harbor. Do you agree?
Oh, it's far worse than Pearl Harbor, John. What we've got is a vicious attack on the United States. Interestingly enough, I was on my way back here from Detroit on what may well have been one of the last flights to get off the ground before all U.S. air travel was grounded. Our flight was due to land at National Airport, Reagan National. We were diverted to Dulles. I got a cab driver who was from, of all places, Afghanistan. Paid him heavily. Fox will pick up the tab for that, to get me back here into town. Several remarkable things, John. In spite of the attack here on Washington, remarkable calm as people were courteous but moving quickly to get out of the area. The attack on the Pentagon had activated all of the local law enforcement emergency rescue, to include the Fairfax fire and rescue experts, who are now, I'm told, being prepared to go to New York to assist in any recoveries that can be made up there. As you know, there are experts that worked on the first World Trade bombing and, of course, Oklahoma City. I'm also told that the attack that may have been aimed not at Camp David but at the National Military Command Center, Fort Detrick, Maryland, the attack that apparently brought down a plane near Somerset, Pennsylvania. And finally, there is talk already here in Washington of postponing or indeed canceling the the International Monetary Fund and World Bank conference here at the end of the month, which was scheduled for Washington, and which the city was girding for. In fact, went through an emergency drill last week, which may well have helped some of the response here at this end. No doubt that this is the worst attack against the United States that we have ever experienced. My sense is, John, that there's going to be a call not to treat this as a crime, but to call it what it is, a war, and it may be a call for the Congress to do just exactly that, to make a declaration of war.
Ollie North, thank you. Stay with us if you would, please. Let's get some thoughts on that from another man who knows more than a thing or two about declarations of war. Al Haig, the former general and also former Secretary of State. Is it time to be talking about that? Is it time to declare some kind of a war here, Mr. Secretary?
Because we have a couple of we've got 4 significant aircraft today which have been involved in disasters, and we've asked Lynn Scher, one of our reporters, to try to nail down what we know and what we don't know. Lynn, are you there?
I am, Peter. As you point out, it was airplanes that were the weapons of destruction today, not bombs, passenger planes. We actually know very little for sure about what happened, but we do have some details. And bear with me because the information keeps changing. But I want to start with the only one that horribly we actually did see happen. And this, of course, was the plane that crashed into World Trade Center number 2. That, of course, was the South Tower. That's it on the right. Now, and there's the flame from it. What you're seeing is the North Tower. Behind it, there's a second identical tower. As you know, that plane crashed right into it. All morning, we have been told by American Airlines, among others, that that flight, that airplane, was actually American Airlines Flight 77 going out of Dulles to Los Angeles. We were told 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots on that plane. It was hijacked at 9:03. I'm sorry, it was hijacked right after takeoff, crashed into the tower at 9:03 a.m.
Let me stop you right there, Lynn, because I've had different information, so I'm going to rely on you here. You now believe that American Airlines Flight 77, which took off for Dulles on its way to Los Angeles, crashed into the trade towers, not into the Pentagon.
We were told that originally. What I'm about to tell you is that the FBI is now saying that that's the one that went into the Pentagon. The FBI spokesperson is saying that the flight that went into World Trade Center Tower number 2, that South Tower, was in fact the United Airlines 175, a Boeing 767 that left Boston for LAX, departed at 7:58 a.m. this morning. 56 passengers, 2 pilots, 7 flight attendants. This is confusing. I apologize. We are getting 2 different answers to our questions. What I can tell you that appears to be accurate is that the plane that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:45 a.m. was in fact American Airlines Flight 11, American 11, going from Boston to LAX, 7:59 a.m. departure, hijacked right after takeoff, 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots. We know of 1 other aircraft involved in today's episode, Peter, United Airlines Flight number 93. This was another Boeing 757, left Newark at 8:01 this morning en route to San Francisco. 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. It went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which is near Johnstown, which is just southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I believe we have some video of that crash site right there, and that's where this flight went down. We are waiting for a press conference from the airlines to try to make some of this clear to us, but right now that is all the information we have on those 4 planes.
Can I just absolutely confirm, because I'm trying to make it even clearer for people, though you did a much better job than I did. This is from the FBI spokesperson you're talking about, right?
What I'm telling you is that the FBI spokesperson has said United Airlines 175 from Boston to LAX is the one that went into the World Trade Tower number 2, the South Tower. The FBI is also telling us that it is American 77 from Dulles to LAX and to Los Angeles Airport that went into the Pentagon.
Okay, thanks very much. So what we have now in terms of the trade towers, we have 1 American Airlines aircraft, 1 United Airlines aircraft, which hit the 2 trade towers. We have a 2nd American Airlines aircraft, which goes into the Pentagon. And we have a 3rd aircraft, United Airlines, which we have no idea about either whether it was on a mission or for what reason it crashing southeast of Pittsburgh today. But 3 major aircraft today carrying considerable numbers of passengers and crew on board are all down, at least three of which appear to have been involved in a coordinated attack on the United States. I should also tell you that abcnews.com plays an important role in our life all the time, but it's very important at a moment like this, and has a good many offerings up at the moment, including the continuous reporting of the work we're doing here on television and they're doing on their own. There's a reader messenger board up there, as always, and that's very often provides information. It has a lot of reporting on the status of air travel and the FAA response, most of which I think we've reported here, but if you want to get it locked into your mind, you can go to abcnews.com. And then there is a lot of reporting, as there always is at abcnews.com, about the ramifications of this to individuals, to communities, and to the country as a whole. Tony Cordesman is in Washington at the moment. And Tony, since I talked to you last, I'm not sure how much more we or you have learned about this attack or the...
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report from WTVM.
We are interrupting our national coverage. We will get back shortly about the attack on the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon, because we do want to, at this point, bring you some local perspective. Good afternoon. I'm Dee Armstrong. This is a sad occasion, but this is our job to bring you the information. Alabama Senator Richard Shelby is the ranking Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
A live television report to CBS News a short while ago also began to collapse. This was the scene just after the collapse of the buildings, New York City high school students being evacuated. Teachers and others counseling them, be careful as you flee.
Just dust, don't run.
At the World Trade Centers, some people jumped, were forced out of windows at high up. 110 stories were those buildings. This was the scene. Horrified spectators cried aloud as they saw one after another persons jumping or forced out of the building. There were secondary, then third explosions, and then a fourth explosion. Apparently, no one knows for sure, from the high-octane fuel and other causes in the interior of the building brought about by the crash of the 2 planes into the World Trade Centers. 4 aircraft, commercial aircraft, were hijacked during the day. 2 of them crashed into the World Trade Center buildings. Another apparently crashed into the Pentagon, where there has been some loss of life, how much we do not know, and there have been some injuries. And then another plane is believed, this has never been completely, totally confirmed, in the area of Camp David, the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland. FBI officials reported earlier that a plane had crashed in that vicinity. It's been a confused reporting situation about that since then. And then in western Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area, there was a big plane crash there, details of which are still being sorted out. That was the crash in Somerset, Pennsylvania. So the North World Trade Center towers hit, then the South Tower hit, both collapsed. Plane crashed at the Pentagon, plane crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and one may, I underscore the word, have crashed in the vicinity of Camp David, Maryland. This is the most audacious attack that's ever taken place in the world. The most audacious terrorist attack ever taken place in the world, according to Chris Yates, an aviation expert with Janes in London. And he said it takes a logistics operation from the terror group involved that is second to none. He went on to say that only a very small handful of terrorist groups is on that list, and he names at the top of the list Osama bin Laden. That's quote unquote for Mr. Yates. However, we keep emphasizing no one knows who's responsible for what happened today. You may want to note that on previous occasions, first reports about who was responsible for what turned out to be erroneous. It will be many hours, perhaps days and weeks, before it can be sorted out who, in fact, is responsible for these actions today. John Roberts is at our Washington bureau. John? Well, Dan, let's first of all speak to the issue of whether there was or there was not any kind of a crash in the Camp David area. I spoke with Secret Service sources just a few minutes ago, Dan, who say that they have no evidence that there was any kind of a crash or an explosion, fire, or anything near Camp David in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland. They say that there was this aircraft that went down in the Pittsburgh area, which is still some distance from Camp David, but there was nothing, at least, probably I would think within a number of miles radius of Camp David, and nothing to suggest that Camp David may have been specifically targeted either. However, they do not know at this point where that aircraft was headed, whether it was indeed
terrorism for us. It is also here at the moment. Vince, do you want to make some comments about this?
Yeah, Peter. New York Stock Exchange shut down today. It was supposed to open late. It decided not to open at all. The NASDAQ was shut down today. But here's what's interesting about the World Trade Center. It is actually a complex of buildings way beyond the two gigantic towers that John pointed out that collapsed today. It houses some of the most pedigree firms and financial names on the planet. Morgan Stanley Dean Witter has essentially been demolished today. Offices that out there are now gone from there. They occupied the upper tier floors in the so-called One World Trade Center that was hit by that second plane. We should also point out that the New York Mercantile Exchange was essentially destroyed today. That is where much of the world's oil and energy and metals trading is done. Why is that important? Because if you can stop that or disrupt that, you can cause those prices to dramatically rise. And that is exactly what's happened. Some of the fallout from this goes way beyond the smoke fires you're seeing there on that screen. Oil prices rocketing today, up to $32 a barrel, a better than $6 advance. We're also seeing stock markets across the world falling on this, on concerns that the safe haven of the world is in considerable disarray. Linda.
We want to take you now to Washington, D.C. You now know that the U.S. military has been placed on high alert status. That is U.S. military personnel in the United States and all around the world. There is also, just to give you more information, amid this fire at the Pentagon, apparently from this plane crash earlier this morning, there is a full air cap around all of Washington, D.C. We thought we take it to Tony Snow, who is monitoring things in Washington. He has more new information. Tony?
Thanks, Linda. Well, the Pentagon, Craig Quigley, the Rear Admiral, who's a well-known public affairs officer, has given an off-camera briefing to some of our reporters. He said the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was, in fact, in the Pentagon at the time of the explosion, and furthermore, tried to make his way within the building to the site of the explosion. He went outside for a bit of time to try to assist with some of the wounded, then was ushered back in, and he's now at the National Military Command Center, which obviously is serving as a hub of not only gathering and providing information, but also trying to formulate a follow-up strategy to today's acts of terrorism around the country. And here's Craig Quigley.
The defense can impose around the world. They are imposed on a local basis, because what may be true here in Washington could be very different in San Diego or some other location. Here in Washington, D.C., we are at threat condition Delta. That is the highest condition that we can go to. That is the absolutely appropriate thing to do given the events of this morning. What seems to have happened is that we had an aircraft intentionally fly into the Pentagon. For those of you with cameras, you can see the spot behind me. There were intense fires following the aircraft's impact into the building. Arlington Search and Rescue personnel are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense. The fires are still burning in the Pentagon, at least in that vicinity. We have a variety, too many to even mention, of local first responders, fire departments, police departments, you name it, that have rushed to the aid of the Pentagon here and the people. Each of the military departments is working to set up an 800 toll-free number where family members can call to find out the status of their loved ones. As soon as we have those phone numbers, we will give them to you. I would ask for your help, please, in getting those numbers out as far and wide and quickly as possible so that we can alleviate some of the concern for individuals who have
right to your front door.
Holding an education event earlier today. Those strong words backed up not too long ago by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who said this barbarism will stand as their shame for all eternity, speaking of the people who perpetrated this act. He also went on to say, Prime Minister Blair of Britain, this is not a battle between the United States and terrorism, but between the free world and terrorism, and that Britain will stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States. Now, shortly after President Bush made that statement, Air Force One took off from Barksdale Air Force Base. Destination unknown, but something curious and unusual happened just prior to Air Force One's departure. The normal, what's called tight pool that follows the president around, usually neighboring in the area between 13 and 14 people, was whittled down to 5 people. There were a number of people from the media who were left behind at Barksdale Air Force Base, which may be a suggestion that Air Force One is not headed back for Washington, because there would be no reason to leave those people if indeed it were headed back to Andrews Air Force Base, but that indeed Air Force One may be headed for another location. At this point, the president is being kept under tight wraps. No one is talking about his destination or his whereabouts, though we do understand that the vice president is still in Washington, D.C. But again, to reiterate, a change with the leadership of Congress. They have been gathered together and are being helicoptered, ferried individually out of Washington, D.C. to an undisclosed location. And again, as far as any explosion near Camp David, Dan, the Secret Service saying that they have no information about that. It doesn't appear to have happened. Dan? Roberts, we know that Vice President Dick Cheney is in charge in the White House Situation Room with able assistance from Condoleezza Rice of the National Security Council. Do you know who is with President Bush? Who would be the expert, if you will, helping President Bush as he's in transit from Florida to Shreveport, Louisiana, and then to wherever else he's going?
Well, Dan, when the president left for this trip to Florida, it really was more of a political and an issues trip. So he took his top advisors. Karl Rove is with him. Karen Hughes is with him, as are many of his top political and issue advisors. General Powell was in South America. He is headed back to Washington. Condoleezza Rice stayed here. I do not know if Stephen Hadley, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor, might have been traveling with the president. But Dan, as it was just a quick overnight to Florida, there's no reason for Mr. Hadley to be there. So it may be that the president does not have one of his senior national security staff with him. There's probably a minor staff member. But certainly, Dan, they are doing everything they possibly can to hustle out to the president all of the expertise that he would need. But certainly, Dan, his closest cadre of advisors have been with him since he left on Monday afternoon.
Our White House correspondent John Roberts in Washington. We go to Scott Pelley in downtown on the tip of Manhattan, where the Twin Towers collapsed. Scott?
Dan, I'm just a block from the airplane impacted. They were getting their tools off their truck when the building began to collapse, and they described diving into a subway station and hearing all of the World Trade Center tower falling all around. If the subway station had not been right there, they would certainly all be dead. They also described from the center of this scene a New York City police lieutenant who was telling them to be careful to get back, and as he was waving his arms in the air, a piece of debris apparently fell from the World Trade Center building and severely wounded this officer who was trying to help the firefighters stay safe. Dan, I'm at the corner of West Broadway and Murray Street, and it is an unbelievable scene here. There are huge drips of paper. This is all the office paper that was so carefully filed in all the hundreds and hundreds of offices in the World Trade Center. It's now scattered everywhere, drifting around like snow. I've seen letters from law schools. I've seen Christmas cards, all kinds of correspondence from what were all the neat, orderly offices and orderly lives in the World Trade Center now blowing around the street here in lower Manhattan. And finally, couldn't help but notice for the last several hours, there have been several flights of U.S. Air Force F-15 fighter planes flying overhead. One might presume that they are flying combat air patrol over Manhattan to make sure that no other unauthorized aircraft get anywhere close to here, flying combat air patrol over the soil of the United States. Dan?
Scott Pelley in Lower Manhattan. Rocky Pasafaro is a chauffeur who was waiting for a client at Broadway and Chambers here in New York City, about a half-mile from the World Trade Center buildings. Mr. Pasafaro, you saw one of the planes do what?
Well, you know, I was outside my car reading the paper, and two women walked by me, and they looked up and they says, "Look at that!" And as soon as I looked up, the plane entered the first building with the antenna, and just blew up in tremendous explosion and paper and smoke and everything, and it was just like chaos. And then, like 15 minutes later, I see the other plane coming northbound, hit the South Tower, and a big ball of flame. Everything was blown all over the place. It was terrible. I spent a lot of time in Nam, and I seen a lot of action, and this was scary. I seen people jumping off the buildings. I seen people getting, they were running out in the streets, getting hit by cars. It was just ugly. It was just terrible.
Terrible indeed. Did you get a look? You said you saw first one plane. Did you get a look at that plane?
Yeah, it looked like a big passenger liner, yeah.
Well, American Airlines says it was one of their passenger airlines that hijacked. Did you get a look at the second plane?
Yeah, it looked like a small jet, double engine maybe, you know, one of those corporate jets, I guess, and it looked like that. It hit so fast.
American Airlines says it was another one of their commercial jets, but a smaller jet.
Version, yeah.
Now, tell us about, in the case of the first plane, about how high up on that tower did it hit?
It hit at least 20, anywhere between 20 to 25 stories below the top.
So it's a 110-story building, so you'd say
about 90, maybe
85, 90 stories?
And it made a gigantic hole.
And the second plane?
Hit a lot lower, like in midsection of the building, like around floor 50, 60, around there.
Now, as terrible as it is, you said that you saw some people jump from the buildings.
I thought it was debris, but you've seen people jumping off that building. It was ugly. It was terrible. I've seen a lot of things in my lifetime, but I just can't imagine jumping off a building 110 stories high. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, it was just chaos everywhere. The explosion, the floors were shaking. I mean, that second plane that hit, it was a ball of flames, no exaggeration, 150 by 200 each way. That's how big it was. It was rocking, debris everywhere.
The ground shook?
Yeah, I got stuff all over my car, too.
Was there a great rumble, or was it just one huge boom?
Yeah, one big boom.
That was the first plane.
The first one was, yeah, it had a loud sound. I thought it went inside the building. I thought it looked like it was gonna hit the building, then like fall down. It didn't. It went right through, like a rocket. Went right through the building. Then it exploded inside, and there was debris, paper, smoke. It was just ugly.
Rocky Pasafaro, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
We go to Washington and Jim Stewart. Jim?
Dan, federal authorities are beginning to piece together a timeline which will assist them in their investigation, but quite frankly, at this point, don't answer as many questions as they raise. Let me run through with you what they report to be the sequence of events. The first explosion took place at 8:48 a.m., and this was the American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. It crashed into the World Trade Center. At 9:04, the picture that we have seen now many times is the United Flight 175, also from Boston to Los Angeles, it too crashing into the World Trade Center, the second tower. The next explosion occurred at 9:38. That was in Washington, D.C., and involved American Airlines Flight 77, which was traveling from Dulles International Airport in Washington to Los Angeles. That plane crashed into the Pentagon. The fourth plane remains the big mystery. That was United Flight 93, Dan, which was departing Newark for San Francisco. It did not crash until a full hour after the Pentagon explosion. It went down at 10:20 a.m., according to the FBI, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And the sequence of events there was that this flight abruptly changed course en route from Newark to San Francisco, somewhere over Pennsylvania, and headed directly toward the Washington, D.C. area. According to senior officials who were in the command centers at FBI headquarters, there was literally a moment of great panic. They anticipated that this aircraft was headed toward the Washington area. The FAA informed the FBI that the flight path of that aircraft would take it over Camp David. An attempt was made, we are told, to communicate with that aircraft, and there was no response. Now, we are also told that there was a response. There was some sort of communication with the other aircraft, so that part of this mystery is unclear, but apparently someone on these aircraft did communicate back to the ground. Whether it was the pilots signaling distress or whether it was the people who had hijacked them is not known at this time. But the confusion over the Camp David is clearly that. This aircraft, United Aircraft Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, changed course abruptly and was on a flight path that was taking it over Camp David, headed directly toward the Washington area, when it mysteriously crashed. What caused that crash is entirely unclear at this point. Finally, intelligence officials say officially that they are attributing this, that has the, quote, signature of al-Qaeda, which is the terrorist organization belonging to Osama bin Laden, but they go on to say, and I quote, "It is our leading theory, but it is only that. It is a theory. It has his signature. It fits with his past pattern of terrorist events against the United States." Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington. The Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA, confirms now that all U.S. domestic flights have landed safely. Airports around the country, as they were directed to do, have shut down, some for the first time in their history. This is obviously an unprecedented situation, the situation being many people, how many we do not know, but many people have lost their lives in the collapse of the World Trade Centers here in New York after each of the Trade Center buildings, 110 stories high, was hit by an aircraft. There have been fatalities at the Pentagon when a plane was crashed into the U.S. Defense Department there. And in this situation, there's much that is known already, but there's so much more that is unknown. The Walt Disney Company has shut down its U.S. parks and has begun what it calls assessing global operations. Disneyland in Tokyo and Paris are still open. It's this kind of thing that a lot of corporations are going to have to be making some decisions as the hours go by here. The Emmy Awards scheduled for Sunday have been canceled. Pope John Paul II condemned what he called the unspeakable horror of today's inhumane terrorist attacks, unquote, the Pope. Now, President Bush has spoken twice today, once just after the first attacks became clear on the World Trade Centers. He was in Florida doing some work there with school children. Also, we mentioned earlier his brother's in a gubernatorial re-election situation there. The president was on a domestic trip to Florida. He spoke there, said he was going back to Washington, but he didn't. He was next reported at Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana. There he made a videotape, somewhat more extensive statement, the president saying, one, that these were in effect cowardly acts and that they would at least eventually be punished. That was the essence of his remarks. He also called for calm and for the American people to know that their government was continuing to work, continuing to operate. All this is a paraphrase of the president, and the president on both occasions asked for the prayers of those families most directly affected by the death and destruction wrought today. Now, the situation at the moment is here in New York, hospitals are absolutely overwhelmed. Keep in mind how many hospitals there are in New York. The mayor told us, I think it's something like 150 or 60 hospitals. The hospital situation is being stabilized now. Obviously, in the early going, they had to triage out, triage meaning, make decisions on who gets immediate treatment and who does not. The situation in the hospitals is, what last report was beginning to stabilize some because there is so much hospital help available in New York and in the surrounding areas. Some of the casualties were taken to hospitals outside New York into the suburban areas. Some elements of the National Guard have been called into service in New York to back up New York's outstanding police and fire departments. The police and fire departments here, of course, in this large city being very large, some 40,000 plus police when you count the transit police available here, very large fire department, but no city anywhere in the world could count only on its own resources when attacked in this way. Now, police say no one is going to the World Trade Center until the fire is out, and the fire is definitely not out. There are people believed trapped inside the debris of the now totally collapsed World Trade Centers. Both of the World Trade Centers have collapsed. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani told us in our CBS News interview that some of the people bound to have been trapped. Others leaped from the building in terror, in effect forced out by the fire and explosions. And one pauses almost every time you see these scenes, because if you didn't know that this was real and this videotape was taken as it happened, and you see some debris and in some cases people coming down the side of the building, you would say it must be from a horror movie. It is horrible. It is not a movie. John Serra, forgive me, is on the telephone. He was on the 47th floor of one of the World Trade Center buildings when the plane hit. Mr. Serra, thank you for being with us. What was it like?
It was very scary. We thought it was a bomb at first. The whole building shook. I was in number 1 World Trade Center, 47th floor, and I work in securities area. And first we thought it was a bomb. Then we all ran towards the main door away from the windows, and we saw debris flying outside and everything. And then out in the hallways there was a lot of smoke. So we stayed in the office. We didn't go out into the hallway. We tried to get in touch with people to find out what was going on. Someone's relative called and said that it was on CNN that a plane had crashed into the building. And another person I work with called and spoke to a friend she knew down in security, and he confirmed that, and they told us to stay put, not to leave yet. A few minutes later, we were told it was okay to start going down the stairs, and we all, it was about 45 of us. We waited till everybody got out, and then we started down the stairs, and there was not that much smoke in the stairways, and we all had wet rags and kept it in front of our face. And when we got out into the stairs, people were coming down from the 70th and 80th floors, and later on we saw some injured people. People would yell down, "Stay to your right," and people that had burns and some were cut up or whatever. We went down first, and also some pregnant women shut down. Everybody was very helpful and orderly in the stairs, and then we started seeing firemen after we got down to the, I think, third. Firemen were coming up, walking up, carrying equipment, and at one floor, people were passing out bottles of water from a water machine, so we could, pour the water on our heads and keep the rags wet. And the smoke was not that bad, We were able to get down slowly, and I think it was 10 o'clock when I got out of the building, and that's when some debris fell down, and I was across the street, and we ran down into like a subway entrance. At that point, I became covered with the soot and the ash and everything. And then I just walked up north as far as I could, up Broadway. My sister works at Spring Street in the Village, and I went to her office. She wasn't at work, but the people in the office helped me clean up, and then I walked across the Williamsburg Bridge and came to my sister's house in Greenpoint. And I was able to contact my wife and children, let them know I was okay, and friends. It was horrible. It was unbelievable. I cannot fathom that the buildings collapsed. I can't.
John Serra.
Yes.
Eyewitness who was on the 47th floor of one of the World Trade Center buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your moving eyewitness account. We go to Los Angeles. Brian Jenkins of the RAND Corporation, one of the world's ranking experts on terrorism. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for being with us. This is unprecedented today. Give us some context for it.
It is unprecedented in terms of the enormity of scale of this attack. It has long been feared by those who analyze terrorism, who look at these things, that we could see a major attack on U.S. soil. And certainly there have been many scenarios that have been tested in the various exercises that have been conducted in cities across the United States. But there is nothing in the exercises that prepares you for the stunning images that we have seen today that will take us years to digest.
Mr. Jenkins, there's never been a similar.
You heard that?
I heard that, as you did. My security sources don't know anything about that, so we haven't been able to confirm anything along those lines.
Then we'll leave it alone. Claire, thanks very much. We'll come back to you as soon as we know where the President is going to go next. Seems a little bit strange. Pierre Thomas, work on the phones on the FBI. What have you got, Pierre?
Well, one of the first things that they are focused on, obviously, is the injured, but the next priority is to get to Dulles International Airport, which they are, and Boston Logan. They are going to talk to the Boston United and American airline officials. They're trying to get a sense of who was on the plane. Early on, they're very limited in what they can do. They're trying to assess the situation, but one of the first things they can try to do is try to get a sense of who was on the plane, try to begin to check out aliases, and that might lead them in some investigative direction. But they're very limited in the early stages in terms of what they can do.
Exactly. Many thanks. And as you and John Miller have reminded us several times today, we're covering a tragedy and we are covering a crime. And so the FBI is now beginning to get things together in terms of trying to piece together the elements of crime. The only thing you get out of the airplane, one assumes at this point, is a long time from now, evidence of explosives on board that were not the gas tanks, the black boxes, which survive pretty much anything. I think it is our experience. But in terms of trying to chase down the human beings, going to those two airports to see who got on board and checking the passenger list.
Absolutely. Things that they can't get at right now. They can't do very much investigative work at the scenes. Right. So where they go is where the plane took off from. Talk to those officials. One official told me, quote, "We're trying to talk to any and everyone who touched that plane, from maintenance workers to the people who ticketed the persons getting on the plane."
Great. Thanks, Pierre. Keep at it. By the way, the Federal Aviation Administration says that the earliest that they will allow flights to resume, this may change, will be noon tomorrow. More than 24 hours after they first ordered all aircraft not to take off and then all aircraft to land as soon as possible. And I think that all domestic U.S. flights are now currently on the ground. Some international flights coming from overseas are still on their way to West Coast airports and still in the air. But what is quite staggering here in a way is the FAA says they will only allow flights to resume at noon tomorrow. We're talking, if you add it up, about approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of 36,000 flights, back and forth and up and down, and all the interim places across the United States. We all know, those of us who travel by air on a regular basis, exactly how difficult air travel is and how much of it there is at the moment. But there's a outstanding example of what it means to put out an order like that. 36,000 flights going to be halted. In fact, I think Charlie Gibson, my colleague who was here when this happened this morning, has been looking particularly at this dimension of it. Charlie?
Well, Peter, I just found a note that all U.S. commercial aircraft, I wasn't absolutely certain what you said a moment ago, but that all U.S. commercial aircraft that were not involved in hijackings today, obviously, but we know what's happened to those planes that were hijacked, but all U.S. commercial aircraft have landed, and as you mentioned, there will be no flights resumed until noon tomorrow. A couple of just incidental tales of what are happening in various states around the country. Much of this redundant to some things Peter had said, some of it new information. This Sunday's Emmys Awards ceremonies in Los Angeles has been postponed because of today's terrorist attacks on the East Coast. The head of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences says he's not going to set a new date for the ceremony until the national mourning that is going to take place is over. Latin Grammy Awards scheduled for tonight in Los Angeles, those have been canceled. In the sports world, as we mentioned a while ago, and there's some other cancellations as well, the 15 baseball games have now been canceled around the country that were to be played in the major leagues tonight. The minor leagues postponed all of their playoff games. Their regular seasons are over, but the playoff games in the minor leagues have been canceled. The commissioner of baseball said in the interest of security and out of sense of deep mourning for the national tragedy that has occurred today, all Major League Baseball games for today have been canceled. The PGA Tour has canceled the beginning of tournaments on Thursday, and whether they will be further delayed is uncertain. Major League Soccer postponed all of the games it had scheduled for tomorrow night, and the National Football League says it is mulling over whether to postpone this weekend's schedule. Obviously, the effects of this are going to reverberate for many days, many weeks, many months, and so there are those kinds of cancellations being discussed.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks. I just, as we want to go to try to bring it back together for people who, a lot of people have been not with us all day. The thousands and millions of people may have been glued to their televisions, impossible not to, but ABC's John Donovan has been following the events of the last few hours, and he has managed to put together, I suppose we could call it a chronology or a timeline, if you will, but here is some sense of what happened from the beginning.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at
the first thing any
Trade
television
Center
camera saw this morning was this. Just before 9 o'clock, roughly 15 minutes earlier, an American Airlines jet hijacked from Boston had crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. There were 92 people on board.
It does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
My God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in.
Minutes later, the second plane, the second tower. The fireball ate up the aircraft. It was a United Airlines flight, a 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. There had been 65 people on board.
Some sort of a concerted.
I was happened to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
New York City was staggered.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky.
We're going to interrupt this. We'll come back to this, I promise you, to go to a news conference being held by the Mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani.
And then, Governor, thank you very, very much for your assistance and your help and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership through this crisis. This is a vicious attack upon New York. It's an attack upon America. It's an attack upon the whole concept of freedom and our way of life. And we cannot let these attacks succeed. The first step has to be to make sure we do everything in our power to protect the people and to save the lives of those whose lives are still at risk and to help those who have been injured. And I want to commend the mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the federal government have all offered and made ready support to help us deal with this ongoing crisis. The people of New York are not only the freest and most diverse people in the world, we're also, I believe, the most capable of rising to meet the challenges of this type of attack. And right now, we want New Yorkers to remain calm, to go about their business, to appreciate the fact that everything to provide for their safety is being done, to appreciate that everything that can be done to provide for the health and the needs of the people who are still at risk is being done, and that we will continue to work to make sure that we get through this as strongly and quickly as possible. I want to thank the federal administration. Secretary Thompson has been on the phone with me a number of times, as well as the president, for what they are offering and prepared to do. And we're just confident that, well, this is a horrible attack and one that is despicable and really unthinkable in its magnitude. We will get through this, and we will continue to have a great and free country, state, and society.
Do we know the number of casualties at this point, sir?
I don't think we really want to speculate about that. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. And I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible. And I don't think we will know the answer to that until sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Were there large numbers of firefighters?
There are a large number of firefighters and police officers who are in harm's way. and we don't know how many we've lost. But there's no doubt we've lost some firefighters and police officers.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the two buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else?
We
second explosion?
we believe that it was caused by the after effects of the planes hitting the buildings. We don't know of an additional explosion after that.
Mr. Mayor, could you tell us, do you expect any further attacks on New York? Is there anything to indicate that there could be more bombs, more planes out there? I know originally there was a report that 8 planes had been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by some...
We have no specific information to that effect. Obviously, the city is now closed. The airspace around the city is closed, and we are on heightened alert. But we have no specific information suggesting any further attack.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us where the planes came from? Why are 2 major warships coming into the port of New York?
I think to give the people of New York confidence, to show that the federal government is standing with us, and to just to make certain that nothing further happens. This has been a very, very difficult and traumatic day for the people of the United States and the people of the city. And I think that it's an act that shows that the federal government is going to do everything they can to support us and help us.
Can you give us an idea of the extent of the rescue effort that's going on right now in Lower Manhattan? The scope of this operation?
There are over 1,000 rescue workers, probably about 2,000 that are deployed, trying to get into the buildings, trying to find people, trying to search for people. The governor and I spoke a couple of hours ago. And the governor has deployed the National Guard to relieve them because our people are going to need reinforcements pretty soon. But right now they don't want to leave because they're searching for innocent citizens, and they're searching for some of their brothers and sisters.
Are you finding survivors?
Yes, we have some numbers that we can give you. We have 1,500 people at Liberty State Park who were evacuated, described as walking wounded. They were evacuated by ferry and other means. There are about 600 as of about 15 minutes ago in local hospitals that we account for, 600 people that are being treated in local hospitals. And there are 150 in particular that were critical, that were moved by EMS. New York City has 170 hospitals. So we have a lot of hospitals, and we're utilizing all of them. Probably the one that was the hardest hit was St. Vincent's Hospital. And I would like to just single them out and commend them, because as I was rushing down there, after the first plane hit, and before the second, they were already deploying people on the street. I could see the doctors and nurses outside getting ready to receive people. And that was before the second plane actually hit the World Trade Center.
What was your experience down there?
Also, blood donations. We have several sites for blood donations. 153 East 53rd Street, 66th and Amsterdam, which is the Red Cross, and 310 East 67th Street. If people want to do something and they can donate blood, that's going to help not just today, but tomorrow and the next day. This relief effort is going to take some time.
Mr. Mayor, you were one of the first people down there. Can you describe the scene in your own words, what you saw down there?
I don't know that I'm really able to describe it. It was the most horrific scene I've ever seen in my whole life. We saw the World Trade Center in flames, a big gaping hole all the way on the top of it. We could see people jumping from the top of the building. And then we went into Barclay Street, 75 Barclay Street, I think it was, and we were there when the building collapsed. And it collapsed in part on 75 Barclay Street. So we were trapped in the building for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, trying to get out different exits. And we finally went through a basement and came out 100 Park Place.
Did you ever fear for your own safety, sir?
Sure, yeah.
What went through your mind?
I don't think anything went through my mind other than making sure that we all remained calm and found an exit and just tried to figure out the most intelligent thing to do. Probably the same thing that went through the minds of 10,000 other New Yorkers who I could see on the streets, and I really have to commend them. If you really want to know what New Yorkers are all about, you just watch the way in which they handle themselves. They didn't panic. They moved deliberately. They moved swiftly. But they didn't hurt each other. They helped each other. I mean, these are just the most wonderful people in the world.
Do we know anything about the composition of that dust that blankets Lower Manhattan? Is there any asbestos or any hazardous material in that dust?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to
Mr.
that.
Mayor, there were reports of a gas explosion related to this as well that you were aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
Mr. Mayor, can you tell us anything about where the planes come from, where the aircraft came from?
Bill Diamond reminds me that we've turned off the gas in the city buildings, just to be certain.
Can you tell us
as a
anything
precaution?
about where these aircraft came from? There was a report they may have been hijacked in Boston.
I think we should leave. I think we should leave that up to the federal government to. Yes, we do have some information, but I think we should leave that up to the federal government to release that information. Our focus is on the relief efforts. And
Governor, do you
What
think
about security for the rest of the
there's on the part of the United States for what happened here in this country, both in New York, Washington, and other places?
First step right now, Marcia, is to make sure we do everything to help those people who need our support, and whether they're injured or still trapped in buildings. The second thing is to make sure at the same time we're providing the maximum security against possible additional incidents. But clearly, this is an attack upon America. It's an attack upon our freedom and our way of life, and we must retaliate and go after those who perpetuated this heinous crime against the people of America.
Mayor, this is just compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war? This has been compared.
I'll do both.
This has been compared to Pearl Harbor. Do you consider this to be an act of war?
This is a vicious, unprovoked, horrible attack on innocent men, women, and children. It's one of the most heinous acts, certainly in world history. And as the governor said, and I said to the president, we fully and completely support him in any action that he has to take in order to make an example out of the people who are responsible for this.
Is it an act of war in your mind?
I don't know that I want to use those words. I think the president is the one that has to respond, and I think what he has to know is that all of us in New York support him, and support him completely in the efforts that he's going to have to make over the next couple of days, week, and to make a point that people can't do this. You can't attack innocent men, women, and children. And ultimately, I'm totally confident that American democracy and the American rule of law will prevail. And the people of New York are going to help to demonstrate that over the next couple of days.
Anybody take responsibility for this? Any group take responsibility at this time? And what is the city doing to safeguard the citizens now that something like this has happened?
Well, first of all, I don't know of anyone that's taken responsibility for it at this time. And secondly, the New York City Police Department is fully deployed, not just in the rescue effort, but all throughout the city of New York, offering as much protection and as much security as we're capable of for the citizens of the city. And at this point, I believe that the people in New York City can demonstrate our resolve and our support for all of the people that were viciously attacked today by going about their lives and showing everyone that vicious, cowardly terrorists can't stop us from being a free country and a place that functions. And we'll do everything we can to make that point.
Jennifer Steinauer, please. Just a housekeeping thing. Can you tell us what's going to happen to the New York primary?
This morning, I issued an order suspending the primary across the state. There will be no primary today, and we'll reschedule it once we get through this.
Jennifer,
Mayor, can you
please.
please walk us through the municipal services right now? What's going on with the subways and the schools, the courts?
The subway, the schools, the chancellor, I commend the chancellor. He was on the phone a number of times with us. He coordinated very, very carefully what would happen. He thought it out, and he came up with a very good plan, which was essentially to keep the schools open, to keep the children in school, so we didn't have a large number of children in the different boroughs that would be released from school. They're being released, I shouldn't say as normal, but basically on the normal schedule. If parents aren't there to pick up the young children, then the children will be taken to a center, and the parents will be notified to come and pick them up. The children who have Metro cards, who normally travel on the subway, will be able to do that. The subways are functioning in 4 of the 5 boroughs, and we get an update, Joe, on how the subway's doing in Manhattan?
All the lettered lines are working.
And in Manhattan?
In Manhattan lines, all the lettered lines.
All the lettered lines are working, including in Manhattan. And throughout the rest of the city, public transportation is normal. So the children should be able to return from school in the normal fashion. And if any children don't have parents to pick them up, then we'll hold them, let the parents know, and then the parents can come and pick them up.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned you were on Barclay Street. What's the radius of damage that's been affected? How many other side streets around the world?
I don't think we know yet. The whole area of Lower Manhattan has been very much affected by it.
How many
police and fire
involved?
How many police and fire are involved? Like how many all NYPD off-duty officers that they come in, or like
All NYPD and FDNY officers are on duty now. and we're going to need all of them, and again, thanks to the governor and the way in which the state reacted, we will have 1,600 National Guard to relieve them over a period of time, so we can get some relief for them.
If anybody's looking for someone that may have been in the World Trade Center or in and around that area, what should they do? How can they get information?
We're going to give you numbers so that we can try to help coordinate that. Individual businesses have already done that, but we will as soon as we can find some time from the relief efforts, give you a number in which people can call, and then we can direct them to the right place.
The National Guard will always or anything like that? Any lawlessness?
There have been no reports of lawlessness.
The governor of New York State, Governor George Pataki, the mayor, Mayor Giuliani, between him, the police commissioner just over on the right side of the picture there, the fire commissioner, the police commissioner more than anybody else being almost a restraining influence there, trying to say both to the governor and to the mayor, be careful what you say here. We don't have information on this, that, and the other thing. And on this question of casualties, it is the mayor who is attested to what everybody's got going, rushing around in their minds at the moment. More casualties, more than anyone can bear, but not willing to make perfect sense, not willing at this point to put a number on the people who they believe have been killed and or injured. The mayor did say that in one of the parks in the lower part of Manhattan, 1,500 people were regarded as walking wounded. They were aware of 600 people in local hospitals, and New York City has 170 hospitals, and as the mayor said, every one of them is available under these circumstances. And there are 150 critical conditions which were taken out, which were medevaced out or taken out under other circumstances, some of them going across the river to New Jersey. And in one case, according to the Canadian television network, saying had been airlifted as far away as Canada in order to get special medical care. Canada has a very strong, several very strong centers in burn treatment, so it may be one of the reasons that patients have gone up that far. The mayor returning again to this thing which has clearly moved him, I think, more than anything else today, getting down there and seeing the two trade towers before they collapsed on themselves, and seeing the fires burning up high, and he said it every time, and seeing the people jumping from the top of the trade towers, driven to their deaths by the encroaching fire in the rooms in which they no longer felt they were particularly safe. And Governor Pataki, I think the first person today to say in the clearest language there's got to be a retaliation. Lots of people said, if you find out who has done this, you've got to be held accountable. Mayor being reluctant to say whether or not the country was in a state of war, which is a technical thing, I think, for him in many ways. But that's pretty much, I think, the summary of the highlights of their news conference, in which there seems to be a real coordination between the local and the state and the federal. And we have here with us a man who should know whether or not it's working, Jerry Hauer, who's the former head of New York City Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, and the last time I saw you was in that place on the west side of Manhattan, which you had designed for just an event, or maybe an event not just like this.
Yeah, this certainly is an incredible event, Peter. I don't think in our wildest imagination you could think about a day where simultaneous attacks, you know, we all think about it, we plan for it, but to have something like this occur is certainly, I view it as an attack on our nation.
But was it? I understand your emotional state. I'd like
Sure.
everybody's the same. I think we're all the same.
Sure.
Did you never consider that this was a possibility?
Well, we consider, and as we plan for New York City, we plan for massive events. In point of fact, one of the things that we did when I was still heading up OEM was we put in place memorandums of understanding with New Jersey, with Connecticut, Nassau, Suffolk County, to ensure that there was enough medical care available, that we had ambulances, police, firefighters, because we had to plan for horrific types of events. And as I told you when you were down, we planned for various types of incidents, chemical and biological types of attacks, for explosive types of attacks. You know, this is clearly just a devastating type of an incident here in the city.
The Office of Emergency Management office, that bunker, it's a pretty elegant bunker, and nor is it underground. It was second and third floors,
right.
I think. That's out of operation at the moment.
Yeah, my understanding
That's
is...
something you never planned for.
Yeah, well, in fact, we did. The alternate was to go to police headquarters or to another location in the event that the command center was inactivated for some reason or rendered useless.
Do you know what has happened to it today? Do you know precisely what's happened to it?
I talked to some folks down there, and my understanding is that a lot of the debris has fallen and has blocked the access to the building. I've heard some reports that they're concerned about the structural stability of the building, but I have not been able to confirm that. But as part of our plan, there were backups. You always have backups in your planning, and that's what the city is doing today.
Now, you've had to walk to get here today, and that's perfectly understandable. We're on the west side of Manhattan, and things are that difficult. But do you have a sense of how it's going? And we've heard the mayor's appraisal and accepted as an honest one. Do you have any sense of how the system's working, and do you have any sense of how many people are still trapped or dead?
Well, first of all, I think that things are working as they should. I think that, you know, when you've got the best police and fire department anywhere in the world, they are doing everything to try and rescue people, to try and get near the building. But you've got to also realize the dynamics in a situation like this change a bit when you have a number of police and firefighters injured as well, and that's what we saw this morning. I was listening to the fire radio this morning when the building collapsed, and they were screaming for help because firefighters were trapped. So the emotion changes a bit, but these are extremely professional people. These are very heroic people. They will do everything they can to try and get in and rescue anybody that could potentially be alive in that building, recognizing that there is a potential for additional collapse.
What about the prospect, as the governor's announced, of the National Guard being called into New York for an act of terrorism? Is this anything you ever envisioned, and what will they do?
Well, in fact, that's the question, John, what they'll do. I would imagine that they will help support the police department, the fire department, provide logistical support, manpower, help with search and rescue. Whether or not they'll be used for law enforcement purposes, traffic control, things like that, I think I've not been privy to those discussions, so I don't know. But that's certainly possible.
Leading up to the millennium, you personally designed a series of exercises where a disaster would unfold and they would respond to it, a tabletop exercise, a field exercise, and then another disaster, and then another, to make it more and more difficult to stretch the resources to the limit. Was that worst case scenario design that you put together to see if the city could handle such a momentous disaster anything close to this, or have a component like this?
Yeah, you know, as we were planning for the millennium, we were planning for millions of people in Times Square and for the potential of something happening there. And we had to look at where all those resources would come from.
So did you have, in your design, did you have a truck bomb go off and then something else happen?
We had a sequence of events, both explosions, chemicals, biological incidents, and we looked at various types of terrorist events. And, you know, I think that what you're seeing here today is the result of having the New York City Fire Department, New York City Police Department well prepared. But again, I don't care where you are, anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. An incident like this is difficult and certainly stresses any system anywhere in the world. And then when you have a number of injuries to police and firefighters, it really does change the dynamics.
Did you ever imagine in your various scenarios that a building, not to mention two separate buildings basically in case of the trade towers, would collapse on one another?
We did plan for building collapse, for bombings, and that was part of our routine planning.
Is there some hint there of what the the operation now faces in terms of what you went through?
Well, what happens from here on out is a very slow process because first of all, you've got to put the fire out, and my understanding is there's gas lines feeding the fire, and it is not out.
A special report from WTVM.
Yes, we are breaking into the national coverage of the attacks on the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon at this time. Good afternoon, I'm Alicia Smith. There are many happenings in Columbus today because of these attacks. Now, as you probably know by now, this terrorism started at 9 o'clock and continued more than an hour. Locally, police and fire chiefs jumped to action. They gathered Columbus leaders together for a news conference. They talked about the possibility of terrorism in our area, but stressed everyone should remain calm. The news leader's Jason Dennis has more from today's briefing.
I think anytime Americans get hurt, that all Americans feel that. I feel it personally. And when you see it happen in one part of our country, it could happen in any part of our country.
The target was New York City and Washington, D.C., but Columbus, Georgia is ready just in case.
We are on the highest state of alert and the highest state of lookout for any problems that may occur. There have been no threats and no problems in the city of Columbus, Georgia that we have responded to.
Top firefighters and police in the city gathered at the Public Safety Building to appeal for calm. They did say there is a higher level of security citywide with officers patrolling more than usual, but do not expect any local disasters.
If you see anything suspicious, give 911 or the Sheriff's Department a call, and we'll get it checked out, find out what's going on.
Columbus emergency officials say they have planned for attacks like this with mass casualties only as a precaution.
We have had exercises, we have had...
And then another plane crashed into a helipad near the Pentagon and put part of the Pentagon in Washington, the U.S. Defense Department headquarters, in flames and filled with smoke. The Defense Department later confirmed there had been some fatalities. They did not say how many, and there were injuries at this place. Then there was a plane crash, apparently, reportedly and supposedly a crashed plane in western Pennsylvania. And Russ Mitchell's been trying to get the facts on that. Russ?
That's right. United Airlines says Flight 93, which was a Boeing 757, left Newark, New Jersey at 8:01 this morning Eastern Time, was headed for San Francisco with 38 passengers, 2 pilots, and 5 flight attendants. United Airlines has confirmed that plane did crash about 80 miles from Pittsburgh. There are no survivors, according to United, at this time.
Russ Mitchell. And then there is the case of a plane is believed to have crashed in the area of the presidential retreat at Camp David, Maryland, but quite frankly, the facts on that remain in some doubt. Now, we're told that President Bush has just landed at Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska. Remember, the president started the day in Florida. He was on a out-of-Washington trip to Florida. Then he turned up at Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana, made his second statement of the day. Now, we're told Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska. Why would he go there? Well, for one thing, the DEFCON planes are headquartered at this place in Moffett Air Force Base, we're told, and that is that there are special aircraft which, in case of, say, a nuclear attack or some other national emergency, that the president could board one of those aircrafts. They have special facilities in case of a national emergency. Now, I want to emphasize the president's been traveling in Air Force One, which has very sophisticated equipment, but is not, in fact, a so-called DEFCON plane. That's special aircraft. We don't know that President Bush is boarding one of these DEFCON planes. We're told what we know, and all we know, is that he went from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport to Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska, and he's now receiving what's called as an up-to-date briefing at the air base in Nebraska. Where he intends to go after this, if anywhere today, is unknown. We'll try to keep you posted as we go along on the president's movements, but a decision was made. He said first, when he was in Florida, he said he was going back to Washington. But a decision was made that he was not going to do that. It was unannounced, as probably should not have been. He wound up in Barksdale Air Force Base, as I say, and now is at Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska, where it said that he's getting a briefing. And let me pause and say that I've made a mistake here. The responsibility is mine and the blame is mine. It is Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, not Moffett. Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska.
So the situation at this hour, let's review. The casualties are many. There are many
ship movements. It is true that 2 aircraft carriers, 5 other combatants, and a hospital ship are now all heading north along the Atlantic seaboard toward New York. No decision has yet been made about exactly what to do with those ships when they get there, but of course aircraft carriers have a very large hospital capability, so they could be used for that. I think it is a responsive measure. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, after the attack on the Pentagon, went immediately to the gash that you see behind me here when the very first destruction was detected and helped pull some people out of the rubble. He is now in what is called the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon, and he intends to stay there indefinitely until all forces around the world have been secured. All forces around the globe at this point are at ThreatCon Delta, which is the highest level of threat condition that American troops can be in. One of the difficulties with the fire and the rescue effort here in the Pentagon, Peter, is we have seen continuous outbreaks of fires within the different levels of the Pentagon, and it has been extremely difficult for search and rescue people to get inside the Pentagon. It was 5 hours before the first people were able to get into some of the rubble to try to begin to pull out people who may have been trapped. The fire in the Pentagon was described as an inferno by those people who were in some of the worst areas. The evacuation in parts of the Pentagon was very orderly. Some of it was complete chaos, as you might expect.
Okay, John, thanks very much. John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We just take a quick look at John there. Jackie, you there for a second? I want to put John on camera for a second because earlier today you described, you just turn around and take a look at that gash in the Pentagon there and describe again for us. You think it's what, 200 feet wide, 200 to 300 feet wide?
It is at least 200 or 300 feet wide, Peter. Just imagine a very large commercial aircraft ramming into this space. The Pentagon is built like a blockhouse, as you know, during World War II. It is a very substantial building, and this aircraft, traveling at between 150 and 200 miles an hour, penetrated deeply into the rings of the Pentagon, almost to the center. The destruction on the 5 floors that are above ground is considerable. One of the admirals was briefing us earlier that he felt that the section that was hit was one of the areas that was being repaired. We now believe that is not true. It is an area that was very fully staffed, primarily with Navy and Marine Corps personnel, but also the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay, thanks very much, John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We'll come back to you. On the phone with us at the moment is the former CIA Director, James Woolsey. Mr. Woolsey, there's so much to ask you about at a moment like this in terms of your experience, but as our political director, or actually that's not true, as a former senior White House official said a short while ago to one of us, there's going to be a hellacious amount of finger-pointing at the moment. What's gone wrong here?
Well, one thing that's gone wrong, Peter, I think, is that for some years now, we have adopted a theory that terrorism first was likely just to be sort of a pickup team, these loose associations of terrorists inspired, say, by the Blind Sheikh in New York. This was the thought in the 2 bombings, one attempted, one real in New York back in the early 90s. And then the Clinton administration veered off into saying everything looked like it might be Osama bin Laden. It's important that we realize there is a real possibility when you have something this devastating and well coordinated that there could be state action of some sort behind it. Now, I don't know that that's the case, and I won't say that it's the case, but there is at least a plausible case that there was Iraqi government involvement in the World Trade Center bombing back in 1993. This all has to do with the identity, the true identity of Ramzi Youssef, who was the mastermind who's in prison out in Colorado now. At his sentencing, the judge said, we still don't really know who you are. And if there was a chance that there was Iraqi government involvement in that, since Youssef was the mastermind of the World Trade Center and of a bombing plot in the Pacific, which he was working on when he was caught, to have a lot of American airlines in the Pacific blown up. What happened today is a sort of amalgam of the earlier two Ramsey-Yusuf plots. It's at least, I think, interesting that that's the case, and if some of the observers, Laurie Milroy and others, are correct, that there's a reasonable chance that he was, in fact, involved with the Iraqi government, there could also be a chance that the Iraqi government is involved here, even if bin Laden or other terrorist groups are as well.
Can I just ask you just a couple of really elementary questions about intelligence? You've just done something on the air which strikes me as what intelligence officers do when they sit down to try to figure out what the heck is going on. Is that in fact what you're trying to do at the moment? You called it an amalgam of two plots. Is that how it works at the moment?
Well, this is nothing but circumstantial evidence that I've been talking about, but it's interesting circumstantial information anyway. And yes, that's the sort of thing that I think intelligence officers need to do. Part of the problem with the World Trade Center bombing back in '93 is that most of the information about it was under grand jury secrecy until the trial, and after that, not many people paid attention to it. So even most of the federal government had no access to it except outside the FBI and parts of justice.
Now, you mentioned governments and individual organizations or operations. Don't governments traditionally leak information more than independent or semi-independent terrorist cells? If there were a government involved, is it not inconceivable that the United States didn't pick up something?
I think it's possible that a government could be involved and not.
Thank you very much for being with us. Let's go to NBC's David Gregory. David, where's the president?
The president, Tom, has just arrived in Omaha, Nebraska at Offutt Air Force Base. There, he will convene a National Security Council meeting with the national security team back in Washington via video conference, we are told. The president, you'll recall, left where I am, which is Sarasota, Florida, earlier today after making a statement about this attack at an education event, which was, of course, scrubbed. His intention at that point was to return to Washington promptly. Security concerns forced him to go to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he made another statement, and now to Nebraska. The White House is telling us he still intends and desires to go back to Washington as soon as he can, but again, security precautions are forcing the president to go to these various locations. Offutt Air Force Base is a secure location for him where he can go about the business of meeting with the national security team. Vice President Cheney, as you have mentioned, running an operations center at or near the White House. We are not told for sure where he is, other than he's in a secure location. The president on Air Force One has contacted a number of the principals who are working in the rescue efforts, namely Mayor Giuliani, Governor Pataki of New York, and of course he has spoken to his wife, who is testifying on Capitol Hill, the First Lady Laura Bush, and the family has also been in touch with their daughters, who are also in a secure location now. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's David Gregory. We're also told that at Offutt Air Force Base, which is the home of the Strategic Air Command, there is the Doomsday plane. It was built to be flying White House for the president in case of nuclear attack. We think that that's where it is located. For a long time, you remember, you heard about the famous Looking Glass missions, B-52s in the air at all hours so that they could launch an attack if this country were ever attacked. The Dr. Strangelove movie scenario came out of all of that. No one ever anticipated that we would have a day quite
region, the leader of Hamas, which is the Islamic militant group that sends most of the suicide bombers against Israeli targets in the last few months. Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, he said America has to change its policies, that the people of the region are very angry with the United States. And there is a sense, and also, by the way, also among the Palestinian media in the West Bank and Gaza Strip in the last few weeks, there's been an upsurge of articles against the United States, some even calling for attacks against American targets. So America very much identified with Israel and the problems in the region. A great danger that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is spiraling, I don't want to say out of control because it already seems out of control, but that things could get a lot worse and that neighboring countries could get pulled in. There's warnings from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon that they're going to start attacks across the Lebanese border against Israel. A very, very dangerous situation here, a powder keg. And what happened in the United States today, many here are seeing as a reflection of the troubles in this region. If indeed it turns out there is a Mideast connection, we don't yet know, of course, who did these terrible things in the United States, but a strong fear here that the Mideast connection is a very real one.
Thank you very much, NBC's Martin Fletcher, as we continue to look with a sense of disbelief at the magnitude of the destruction in Lower Manhattan, the physical destruction. To repeat, as we have throughout the day, we still don't know how many people remain trapped in the rubble, what the exact numbers are. But as you look at that scene, I'll leave it to you to determine in your own mind just how widespread the human loss will be in New York City alone. That's the situation in Lower Manhattan right now. Here's a scene that is unusual in New York, people going home. They were leaving the borough of Manhattan for Brooklyn and other boroughs by going across. I'm told that that's the Manhattan Bridge. It's in lower New York City, and it leads out of the city, and a lot of people went home. This city, the most vital places in the world, obviously, has been all but shut down today. Hospitals working overtime, traffic in Midtown, and many of the high-rises have been evacuated. As we say, these flights that were originating in both in Boston and Newark and in Washington, D.C., no doubt did have some prominent people on board. We're beginning to get some sense of who some of the passengers may have been, but there's been no official release yet of the names of them. American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, 92 people on board. Flight 77 from Dulles to L.A., 62 on board. Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles, 65 on board, and Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, 45 on board. That was the flight that went down near Pittsburgh, the United and American flight that you see one on top of the other. Flight 111 and 175 went into the Twin Trade Towers, and Flight 77 is the one that we believe went into the Pentagon after a very low, swooping turn over Washington, D.C. on a day when the president was out of the Capitol and the Secretary of State was out of the Capitol, and people were anticipating some budget fights coming up in Congress. But America has changed today. This is a dark day in this country. It's in bold print in future history books about how America was attacked within its continental borders with devastating effect by terrorists in a coordinated assault using hijacked civilian airliners to do just that. I'm told that the president went into the underground bunkers called Stratcom on Offutt Air Force Base at 3:06 Eastern Time today. He will be meeting with the national security staff on a video teleconference. Offutt is south and just slightly east of Omaha. It's been a fixture there for a long, long time. And of course, it used to get a lot more attention during the Cold War because it was one of the places that B-52s would be launched for a counterattack, if necessary, against the Soviet Union. NBC's Campbell Brown outside the White House. Campbell?
Tom, we do have a little bit more information on what the president is doing right now. As you said earlier, he's at the Offutt Air Force Base. This is just outside of Omaha. This is, of course, the Strategic Command Center. And this information from the Pool reporter who is traveling with the president. They are allowing 5 members of the press corps to remain at least near the president in that area. And we have been told that he is participating, as you mentioned, in this National Security Council meeting by teleconference this afternoon. He's been in close contact with Vice President Cheney, and we have learned that the Vice President is in the White House. He's working out of the Operations Center in a secure area of the White House. We've also been told that the President has been in contact with his wife, that she is fine, but is also being held in a quote-unquote secure location, an undisclosed location. The President right now is traveling with a skeleton staff of close advisors. Press Secretary Ari Fleischer is with him, his advisor Karl Rove, Andy Card, who is Chief of Staff, and Dan Bartlett with him. Karen Hughes, counselor to the President, is expected to give a briefing here at the FBI headquarters to the White House press corps here in Washington. The President told reporters there that he is anxious to get back to Washington, but understands, given the circumstances and the security precautions that are necessary now, that he needs to be there where he is in a protected area. But again, this is a place where they have the most advanced communication systems, where he can be in close contact with his entire national security team. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Campbell Brown. In fact, that is the nerve center should this country go to war. Those are hardened bunkers deep in the ground. It was the original headquarters of Curtis LeMay, obviously, and Thomas Power, two of the legendary Air Force generals during the worst days of the Cold War, and it's out there in the Great Plains of the Midwest. Lee Hamilton, former senator from Indiana, joins us now. He is a widely recognized foreign policy and national security affairs expert. Mr. Hamilton, the political leadership in both parties, what should be the first moves once we get beyond the ability of get beyond this assignment that we have of rescuing all the people who are still trapped there and sorting out the physical damage?
I think a number of policy areas need to be reviewed and will be reviewed immediately. Everybody thinks first, of course, of intelligence. Our intelligence has been quite good, but massive failure today. There will be almost certainly heavy increases funding for intelligence. There'll be a lot of demands for more human intelligence. Secondly, I think there will be massive reviews of security, all kinds of state, local, federal installations and buildings. How can we improve the security? There'll be, third, a review of community responses. How effective are we in responding to these tragedies, and how quickly? There will be foreign policy reviews, particularly with regard to the Middle East, in the likely event that that's the source of the terrorism. And there will certainly be a review of the priority of the threats that we confront as a nation. So I see this event as having very profound consequences in this country for years and years to come. And on policy, those changes will begin very soon.
I know that you have been one of those many people in Washington who have been concerned about the possibility of a terrorist attack, and we have been saying this throughout the day, but I think it does bear worth repeating. No contingency plan that I ever saw or even heard about, for that matter, prepared this country for an attack of this nature, so complex, so sophisticated, and carried out with such cold-blooded efficiency.
That's true, but also predictable. I think most every expert that I know on terrorism has said, as indeed some of the reports have said, that the American people are not as secure as they think they are in their homes and in their workplaces, that eventually the terrorists, because of their increased skills, increased sophistication, and because of the vulnerabilities of our communities and of this country, because of its openness, that eventually they would make their mark, and they have. Now, I don't think any of us predicted this particular kind of an attack, but the fact that you had a massive terrorist attack on American installations and cities should not come as a surprise.
Unfortunately, I think that that's a commentary that rings all too true. Former Congressman Lee Hamilton, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It is a new day in America, a day of grieving and shock and anger, and a day of profound changes that are yet to come. In what form we cannot say for sure, but obviously this is not just an isolated incident in our lives. This is one that will be a marker in our history. And watching all of this from abroad is Alex Standish, who is with the Jane's Intelligence Digest, as one of the most highly regarded publications in the world in keeping track of just this kind of an incident. Mr. Standish, where were you and what did you think when you first heard that such a carefully coordinated and, I dare say, cold-blooded, efficient attack had been conducted against the United States?
Well, obviously, like all right-minded people, I was totally horrified, but I'm afraid I have to say not entirely surprised. As recently as Friday of last week, our publication specifically warned that anger in the Middle East directed towards the United States from the Islamic world was reaching crisis proportions. And we also specifically warned that there was an upsurge in terrorist activity in Lebanon, Afghanistan and various other countries in the region, which were obviously being attended to by US intelligence. And so I think, as I say, we're horrified but not surprised.
Why the United States has been trying to stay out of the Middle East. They've issued a couple of strong statements against rising Israeli violence, but it has not jumped in on the side of the Israelis, so to speak, in terms of this latest episode of exchanges between the PLO and Israel. Why do you think it came now?
Well, I think this has clearly been an operation which has been planned meticulously, possibly over months, even years. This is not something which has been put together overnight or even in the last couple of weeks. I think these individuals responsible for carrying out these appalling attacks are clearly people who have been in the United States for some time or have been aided and abetted by those who have been in the country. They may well be what we would regard as sleeper agents. I think the timing is probably designed as far as possible at a time of renewed tension in the Middle East to create really the conditions for derailing, possibly permanently, the peace process. But I think there is also an element in which recent pronouncements by President Bush, particularly his statement on the 24th of August, during which he called upon the Palestinians specifically to desist from terrorist activity, have certainly, I think, given the impression, even if that is not the case, that the United States was firmly in the pro-Israeli camp as opposed to being an equal and honest broker within the peace process.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Standish, for being with us. We're going to go to Washington now. Our Washington Bureau Chief, NBC's Tim Russert. Tim?
Tom, it's extraordinary that the mood in Washington. As you know, the President is now out in Omaha, Strategic Command. People in Washington very much looking forward to hearing more from him. The fact that he has chosen to go there, a place which is the nerve center of all our military activity, is an indication that perhaps this threat has not ended. There was some thought that he may be coming back to Washington, and the fact that he has not underscores the concern that there still may be a continuing threat.
We've just been hearing from some of our people in the Middle East and other places saying it would be inappropriate to link this to the recent administration policies in the Middle East, Tim, because after all, as Mr. Standish just pointed out, this took a long time to plan this. This didn't happen in the last 6 weeks or so.
No, Tom, but there has been a steady stream of reports, very unsettling, from the Middle East. The head of Saudi Arabia intelligence resigned without much explanation. There's reports of a near insurrection in Georgia. Egypt has been experiencing a lot of street activity. Clearly, tensions and anxieties and incitements have become almost the norm, not only on the West Bank, but throughout the Middle East. So clearly, people here in Washington believe there is a tie and are targeting the notion that this is a direct response to the tensions in the Middle East, or at least that ongoing conflict. The other thing I can report, Tom, is that investigators are looking very, very closely. I reported earlier to you that, one, all the flights were bound to California with a heavy fuel load. They also now note that all 4 flights were Boeing 757s and 767s. I am told that these have exactly the same flight deck, that if you can fly a 757, you can fly a 767. And they note that rather than go for an Airbus or a 737, all 4 hijackings exactly the same kind of aircraft, which leads them to believe that the terrorists were in fact, could very well have been pilots themselves who have been in this country for some time or trained to fly those planes after hijacking them, because they underscore how difficult it is to control a plane of that size directly into a target like the World Trade Center or the Pentagon.
All right, Tim Russert, as we continue to look at pictures at the hospitals here in New York City as they offload the various injured people, many of them suffering from smoke inhalation. A lot of them were not in the World Trade Center itself. They could have been in the perimeter of it when it came down. There was an almost impenetrable wall of dust and smoke at that time. St. Vincent's and New York Hospital are both down in that area. New York has, as you might expect, both just across the line in New Jersey and in the other boroughs and in the city itself, a number of first-rate hospitals. CNBC's Ron Insana was down there, and he was caught in the midst of all of this as well. Now, when you look at that damage, Ron, you realize again how fortunate you were.
Absolutely, Tom. With the debris raining down, it was certainly a harrowing moment for many people in the lower reaches of Manhattan. And it, you know, as Tim Russert was suggesting, this attack clearly was designed to have maximum impact, not just in terms of the toll on human life or the political impact, but the economic impact as well. The World Trade Center is home to several Wall Street brokerage houses, to a few exchanges where gold and silver and things like that are traded. It is, in some ways, the financial nerve center of New York City. And we have to remember that at least 1/3 of all financial transactions in this country are routed through New York City, so it is very difficult at this time to assess what the economic damage environment. This comes at a time, of course, when the U.S. economy has slowed, where stock prices have come down in historic fashion, Tom, over the last 15 months. This is the type of event that will have rather severe economic consequences on top of everything we already know.
All right, thanks very much. CNBC's Ron Insana. I'm just reading one of the wire reports from the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. One of the passengers on board, we had heard this earlier, managed to get off a cell phone call to an emergency dispatcher saying that we're being hijacked, The plane went down about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. There's been some speculation that it might have been directed at another target of some kind as well, the Capitol or Camp David. We don't know, but it went down at that point. The man was in the bathroom. He had locked himself in the bathroom apparently at that time to say that they were being hijacked. There was an explosion, there was some smoke, and the plane went into a grassy field. All on board that United flight were killed, as you can see, just outside of Pittsburgh in Somerset County. It was that bizarre morning in which there were planes in the air, and some of the airlines didn't know what had happened to them. United, for a time, didn't know what had happened to that flight. In fact, we did know pretty quickly that the American airline flight 11 that went into the Twin Trade Towers first had started in Boston and then gone in there. And as we've been saying throughout the day, these were transcontinental flights and they had a heavy load of fuel, and they might have been picked for just that reason. And Tim Russert was pointing out that if you can fly a 757 or a 767, the flight decks are so similar. So these were probably trained pilots, because it's hard to imagine an American commercial airline pilot, even with a gun to his or her head, that would dive a plane into the Pentagon or into the Trade Center. And of course, which makes this kind of terrorism all the more difficult to deal with, is there are so many people who are willing to die for their cause, as they were in this case. The hijackers went down with the plane, with the planes here in New York and also in Pennsylvania and again in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, where it could have been so much worse. It also tells you about the liberties that we have in this country, that 4 airlines were hijacked today. They flew over the nation's capital. One report indicating that it banked right over the top of the White House before heading for the Pentagon. It was a flight that had taken off from Dulles Air Force Base. And then the flights here in New York, wrapping around the twin towers of the World Trade Center and crashing into them. So you may think that you're inconvenienced by airport security, or that you have been in the past. Think about what it's going to be like in the future and how reassuring it will be to you if it gets tightened up considerably, because it will have to be. Those are just one of the many changes that will occur James Baker is former Secretary of State, former Secretary of the Treasury. He joins us now. He's on the telephone for us. Mr. Baker, this is a stunning and dark day for America.
It is indeed a stunning and dark day. It is a very tragic and sorrowful day, Tom, and I can't imagine acts that are more dastardly or cowardly than what has been done.
There has been a fair amount of discussion today about the United States' role in the Middle East, about how we are inseparable in the minds of the Palestinians and other Arab states with the Israelis. You spend a lot of time in that part of the world. Has it gotten worse, do you think, in the last 2 months?
Oh, I think that the circumstances on the ground in the Middle East have gotten significantly worse in the last 2 months. But then that's really pretty much, Tom, an axiom of Middle East policy, that when there's no progress at the diplomatic table, if there's no political progress, then there's going to be increased violence on the ground. But I must say to you, as bad as it is, I'm not at all sure that we should jump too fast to relate this to the absence of progress in the Middle East peace process over the course of the past 2 or 3 months, because we've had these types of we've had attempts in the past which have been rolled up that had nothing at all to do with the Middle East peace process.
And we continue to be the favorite target of especially Islamic extremists around the world, and whether or not it's related to the Middle East peace process.
That's correct. That's the point I'm making.
Where do we go from here? If you were sitting at the national security table tonight with the President of the United States, what would you be recommending? And I don't want to put you on the spot to try to make it more difficult than it already is for your friend, the President of the United States, but conceptually speaking.
There are not a lot of easy answers. The President, I think, did the right thing when he said America is under a terrorist attack, and we are going to hunt down and punish those we find responsible. And I think that's the approach that the American people want him to take. I do not happen personally to believe we're going to find that a nation was responsible for this. I think we're going to find that it was a terrorist cell or a terrorist group. I think some other things that we need to seriously consider, we actually considered them way back there in my day, is beefing up our human intelligence capabilities. We've let those disintegrate badly over the past 25 years because somehow we held the view in this country that we didn't engage in the dirty business of human intelligence, and it is a dirty business. But if we're going to preempt these types of attacks, we have to have better human intelligence capabilities.
But also dealing with some of those states that are not necessarily sympathetic to our points of view is going to be a very tricky piece of diplomacy in the coming months.
There's a lot of there may be equal parts here of force and strength and resolve on the one hand, and diplomacy and politics on the other. It is very important that we do whatever we can to advance peace in the Middle East. There's no doubt about that, and that of course helps the moderate Arab states that are friends of the United States that have a very difficult time. The leadership of those states have a very difficult time when events like this happen, because when these types of events happen, they harden the views of the rejectionists on all sides.
Mr. Baker, I'm going to presume on our long-time professional relationship and ask you to stay on the phone for a few moments, because we're about to go to the Pentagon, where we're going to get a briefing on what has been going on there. You are a veteran of so many of the American episodes in the Middle East, including, of course, the Persian Gulf War. It's worth pointing out that this briefing is going on outside the Pentagon building. So if I could just ask you to stay on the phone, let's listen to Admiral Quigley.
Okay.
Oh, I'm told it's not quite ready yet. Well, I just will point out that the Pentagon was evacuated earlier today after what Jim Miklashevsky had first reported was an explosion. Then we later learned that it was a United Airlines airliner that crashed into the building near the helipad and penetrated 2 of the 5 rings. There were an untold number of casualties there. We were told earlier by military officials that some people were killed and a number of them had been injured. This obviously is the locus of a lot of the decisions that are being made today. American military forces around the world were put on extra alert. Aircraft carriers were dispatched from the waters off Virginia north to New York City after the second plane went into the Twin Trade Towers. Don Rumsfeld came out of his office for a time and now is working in a more secure location. The President of the United States, who's the Commander-in-Chief, has been moved to Omaha, Nebraska, to Strategic Air Command headquarters, where they have the world's best communication equipment and hardened bunkers that go down several stories, and he can be in touch with the parts of his government that are now in different places in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding environs. Secretary of State Colin Powell is en route back from Peru. That's the gaping hole in the Pentagon. That is a stunning sight when you look at it. That building could not be more secure if you're trying to make a personal entrance into it, and it is fortress-like if you have ever driven by it. And yet, when you direct an airliner into it, that's the kind of damage that can be done. Close to 100 people who were on board that plane were killed as well, obviously. Mr. Baker, let's talk a little bit about where we go from here in this country internally, how the President talks to America and how the political leadership, Republican and Democrat, begin to deal with each other after this attack.
Well, I think anytime you have a crisis such as this, it brings all Americans together, and it tends to bring all Americans together in support of their president, regardless of their party or their political affiliation. It happens in wartime, and it happens, I'm quite confident, in circumstances like this. So I think all Americans will be very supportive of the president and supportive of the administration as we work through these tragic events over the next few weeks. Let me just add, just as a matter of possible interest to you, it was a shocking experience for me today because I happened to be in my in my office in Washington, and I was listening to the reports of the planes going into the World Trade Center. And when that second one went in, or when I guess when the first one went in, it was pretty almost certain that it was a terrorist attack. And then I'm looking out my window, and it looks right out across the river, and I see this plume of smoke begin to rise from just about where the Pentagon is, and it's right. I'm looking out there at the very time that airplane goes into the Pentagon, and it was a shock, a real shock to see that.
Even after all you've been through and all that I've been through, certainly, there was a sense of disbelief at the beginning, wasn't there?
Absolutely, absolute disbelief. And if you remember, some of the early comments were to the effect that maybe some of the aircraft directional devices got off course or something. And yet here were planes in broad daylight in perfect weather flying right into the middle of those Twin Towers.
All right.
It was terrible.
Mr. Baker, we're going to ask you again to stand by. We're going to go to Karen Hughes now, who is speaking for the president.
The activities of the federal government in response to this morning's attacks on our country. As you heard from President Bush a short time ago, the federal government is acting to help local communities with search and rescue and emergency management operations, to take all appropriate precautions to protect our citizens, and to identify those responsible for these despicable attacks on the American people. While some federal buildings have been evacuated for security reasons and to protect our workers, your federal government continues to function effectively. We have a federal emergency response plan, and at President Bush's direction, we are implementing it. We began to implement it immediately after the first attack in New York this morning. We contacted American forces and embassies throughout the world and placed them on high alert. The United States Secret Service immediately secured the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House, and they are all safe. They have also secured members of the National Security Team, the President's Cabinet, and senior staff. As you know, President Bush was in Sarasota, Florida, when the first attack occurred this morning. Air Force One has now landed at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, and the President is in a secure location. He is in continuous communication with the Vice President and key members of his cabinet and national security team. Vice President Cheney and our National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, are in a secure facility at the White House. I have just come from there. The Secretary of Transportation and other members of our White House senior staff are gathered at a command center there, and we are coordinating with other branches of our federal government. The Secretary of Defense remains at the Pentagon, and the Secretary of State is en route back to Washington from his trip to South America. President Bush is conducting a meeting of the National Security Council as we speak. They are meeting President Bush from his location and other members from different locations in Washington and other locations. As many of you have been reporting, the Federal Aviation Administration ordered all airports closed, and all planes which were in the air were directed to land at the nearest airport.